Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, March 14th. That makes it Pi Day, apparently, among math nerds and other types of nerds. I don't know. Apparently, that's the case. I know about that. I know about Pirate Day, and then there's Star Wars Day. And I guess these are all Flying Spaghetti Monster holidays. I'm not really sure about that. Pi Day, terrific. I'll go buy some pie. That's hilarious. I don't mean to take away from it, from those of you that really enjoy it. And, so March 14th, 2018, that has nothing to do with the fact that it's Pi Day. It's Pi Day every year at this point. I do recall that, I was excited for Pi Day in 2015 when it was 31415. Since then, it's just been getting old. It's an excuse to get pie, though, and people like pie. One of my kids doesn't even like pie, so it's not even all that exciting. But it is happening anyway, as is the show. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Bill reminds me all the way from Portland, Maine, that I do a radio show, and I'd better get on the air with it and get started with Connor Lamb's romper stomper victory, as Bill puts it, in Pennsylvania last night, as Bill puts it, because I know it wasn't in Pennsylvania. Right? Was somewhere else? No. Okay, Pennsylvania, so it was. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, proclaims this a rare good news day. And it is. It's a good start to the day. It was a good news day yesterday in that it was, there was a lot of news. There was abundant news. Not all of it good, not all of it. I didn't know how to characterize the news, for instance, that the very stable genius has dismissed half his cabinet at this point. Rex Tillerson, as you know, old news now. Connor Lamb is in. I guess we're declaring this a victory. When I finally gave up and went to sleep, I wasn't really watching all that closely, but fingers were crossed, last night, and it was very close, and it's still very close. And I had a good time with Ernest Twitter as I logged on after the kids' scout meeting, which put it at about 9 p.m. And, of course, every tweet in my timeline is about how close the race is. And I said, I wonder if anybody could tell me whether the race is close. And lots of people enjoyed that for the sarcastic comment it was. Others who love you, thanks very much. I appreciate your wanting to keep me up to date. Let me know. Yes, it was, in fact, a close race. And how many votes were separating the two. So I assume that, there's some procedures we have to go through. I don't know. I didn't watch. After a while, did the Republican concede? I'll catch up because there's a whole thing where Daily Kos writes articles and puts them on the interwebs, and we can catch up. Daily Kos Elections, of course, covering the big news from yesterday with the morning headline for the Morning Digest. In massive upset, Democrat Connor Lamb flips dark red Pennsylvania House seat. We knew it was dark red, and that was the big story of the day. I actually probably spent more time watching people fight about the victory than anything else. I don't even know who's supposed to be disagreeing. I guess progressive Democrats were accused by, I don't know who, centrist, right centrist? I got no idea. Anyway, there was a big fight over who had been the least supportive of Connor Lamb in all of this. And I guess I don't know what to say. More mainstream centrist, rightish leaning Democrats were supposedly angry with progressive Democrats who, I guess one of them read that one time a progressive Democrat at some point expressed some frustration with one or maybe even more than one position that Connor Lamb took. And so therefore all progressive Democrats were, one, still Bernie holdouts, and two, hate Connor Lamb and we want to give the seat back. But then, lots of pushback. I didn't see very much in the way of dissent, even from far, or I don't know, I don't want to say far left, but the most active, vociferous, and I don't know, I guess left-leaning progressive Democrats, I didn't see any of them saying, yeah, we should have run a far more liberal candidate in this very red district. Everybody I saw said, we understand by now what it takes to win in a district like this. And by the way, we also acknowledge that there's so much that Connor Lamb actually did to make it to take more progressive stances than we thought most centrists would ever have counseled him to take in that district. And we're pretty pleased with the outcome. So I don't know who's fighting with who, and now everybody's fighting over whether or not they're fighting. So plenty of excitement to go around. Rather than enjoy the victory and what it means, both symbolically and realistically, and talk about what we might carry from that race forward into November, Democrats like to fight with one another, or at least pretend they're fighting with one another. Maybe it's all a big distraction meant to take our eyes off the ball with respect to, I don't know what, perhaps the fact that it's now been revealed, as though we hadn't had any inkling of it earlier, that Ben Carson and his wife and all of the senior communication staff at the Department of Housing and Urban Development were basically lying about his knowledge of the purchase of what ended up being the $31,000 dining room set. And I have set aside in a report that actually, the more I look at this thing, I'll say this: it was certainly handled very poorly. It was portrayed as his having spent $31,000 on a table, which actually probably isn't accurate or correct. That $31,000 is a lot of money, and I wouldn't spend it on redecorating my house. But apparently, they had a budget. They tried to stay within budget. There's several pieces, and the table itself is actually something like $3,100, which is still an expensive dining room table. But there were several pieces to this puzzle, and it all added up after delivery and installation charges. Anyway, the real point, I guess what really still stuck was all the way through the process, once the story broke, the Carsons and all of the senior communication staff insisted, the secretary and his wife know nothing about this. They weren't even involved in the purchase personally or in any way. Senior career staff was taking care of the purchase and was just, informing them at the end, okay, well, we got your table ready for you. And that turns out not to be true. There's plenty of emails back and forth in which they are making the requests for, first for repairing the old furniture, then for getting new furniture, and here's the price and all that. So I don't know what that leads to in the end, considering all the other garbage that's going on. This is, I think, the lowest level scandal they've got going, and they can be proud of that. The Carsons should be very pleased with themselves for limiting their scandal to under $50,000. I think that's commendable in this administration. Greg Dworkin is with us. My cue to leave. Greg's here, and now Greg and Joan will take you for the rest of the show, because I don't know anything about what's going on. Yeah,
what's going on? I was watching a clip of an old Star Trek with Stephen Hawking and Isaac Newton.
Yes.
And Albert Einstein and Data playing poker. It was really fun.
That would make a great painting if you were...
It was the real Albert Einstein and a hologram of Stephen Hawking and Isaac Newton. No, actually, it was the real Stephen Hawking and a hologram of the other two. And Data just wanted to get them together to see what would happen. And,
it's a good idea, and it could have happened.
Yeah, and the answer was Isaac Newton was very insulted by everything.
Oh, well, he might have been a cantankerous
Don't
fellow.
patronize me, gentlemen.
I did see a great tweet this morning. Somebody said, no eulogy of Stephen Hawking is complete without the story of when he threw a party for time travelers. Have you heard that story?
No. Did you hear the story about running people over with his wheelchair? You tell yours, I'll tell mine.
Oh, okay. Well, according to this story, I will already have heard your story at some point. But this is a quick clip here from I don't know what, but I thought it was good reading. Hawking threw a champagne party for time travelers, complete with, well, it says Krug, which is, I guess, the brand of champagne, and hors d'oeuvres in 2009. But it really doesn't matter because it's for time travelers. But anyway, it was in 2009, and he didn't release the invitations until after the party had taken place. If people had shown up, he hypothesized, it would be proof that time travel is real. But since people didn't show up, time travel is probably not real. He said,
well,
I sat there a long time.
I do that experiment like all the time, every day.
Right. I didn't realize what I was doing, but I will later. I sat there a long time, but no one came. Hawking said in a statement, video of what the party was like from his documentary Into the Universe showed around 10 bottles of champagne being poured into a pyramid of champagne flutes, small plates alongside the drink, but they remained untouched so far. Anyway.
Okay, so I guess we could still go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually theoretically still possible. I don't know what he was
Wow,
talking
that
about.
was great. I really, really appreciate it.
I'm still drunk. All right.
Well,
that's why I'm doing the show.
There's just so much to eat. So in real life,
I will still be drunk later.
That he had a habit of using his wheelchair to ride over your toes if he didn't particularly like you.
Oh, he did it on purpose?
He did it on purpose.
Nice.
And the person that he did this to, absolutely on purpose, was Prince Charles.
What?
And then he had commented later, that was fine, but I really missed the opportunity to have done it to Margaret Thatcher, he said.
Well, that would have been preferable. He's got a problem with Prince Charles, has he? Well, he did.
Another death
that
happened yesterday is, by the way, T. Berry Brazelton. Parents may know him as the author of some fairly famous literature about how to raise your children and how to discipline them. He was 99 years old and still the emeritus professor of pediatrics at a Boston hospital. He was 99. And, he's another famous name that the world has lost. But, what happened yesterday, I think, in Pennsylvania, of course, is well worth talking about. And so let's talk about that.
All right.
I got some polling.
Well, now? Is this time travel polling?
This is time travel polling. Public policy polling did a poll on election night. And they found that healthcare was a defining issue in the race. They said 52% said it was either the most important issue or a very important issue in their vote. And Connor Lamb won these voters 62-38.
Oh, well.
Yeah, this is part of Appalachia, this district. But at the same time, strong union town.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a town, it's a district, but, a
right,
lot of union people who had voted for Trump, but wound up voting for Connor Lamb. Only 39% of voters in Pennsylvania 18 supported the GOP efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act. 53% were opposed, and among independents, who Lamb won 58-41, just 33% supported GOP repeal efforts. So trying to get rid of Obamacare, not popular there, even though it's a Trump district. 41% of voters said Rick Saccone's support for GOP healthcare agenda made them less likely to vote for him. And even with the close race overall, Lamb beat Saccone 45-38 on the metric of which candidate voters thought was more in line with them on healthcare. And with independents, that was 50-34. So healthcare was one of the big issues. Another big issue, I don't know if this particular poll will cover it. I'll look a little bit further. But one of the real big issues is that Rick Saccone was a right-to-work guy in a heavily union district.
Yes. Well, that would ordinarily be a problem if anything mattered.
It did. It does matter. And it's one of those situations where labor can really turn around and say, we won this race for Connor Lamb, which, by the way, puts in perspective why the GOP was so desperate to block Merrick Garland and put Neil Gorsuch on the bench. Because it's issues like this. They really would like to destroy labor and union movements.
Yes, that's a long time goal for them.
So the other thing that public policy polling notes is that Trump's approval rating among yesterday's voters was only 50-48. And that's in a district he won by 20 points. So the survey was conducted on behalf of Protect Our Care and, you ready for it? SEIU.
Oh, those guys.
So the union hired them to the poll. Well, that's appropriate. It's a union place.
Oh, or it's cheating. I don't know which. And Republicans would say it's biased. You bought a poll.
I suppose. There's let's see if I could find this here. Our friend Matthew Martin on Twitter, who goes by Hyperplanes, noted that there's a certain irony in the fact that Obamacare has become a positive voting issue for Democrats, but the tax bill hasn't for the GOP. There was always a hope among Democrats that the Affordable Care Act would create a self-sustaining constituency, but also a profound sense in 2010 that it was the right thing to do even if it cost them votes. And I get the opposite impression he wrote on the tax bill. There's a profound sense if we have to put a win on the board or we're toast, plus fairly aimless policy views. And I don't think it's going to work the same way. If they thought, oh, we'll just go ahead and do what the Democrats did, they have no idea, because actually what the Democrats did was, dare I say it, work.
Yeah, well, yes. Well, that's an excellent point. I like the observation, and then I like your follow-up observation. In order to make long-term gains on something that is a short-term risk, there has to be a solid, mostly well thought through policy, I guess, in order for there to eventually be a payoff. The longer people look at it.
So, I mean, the fact is that Conor Lamb won this district, and he won it maybe by about 600 votes, but he won it. And there just aren't enough votes left in the outstanding absentee ballots to change that. So, about 5 a.m. this morning, MSNBC called him the apparent winner. Okay,
that's a fine hedge.
Right, and it's okay. Alex Burns notes, New York Times reporter, a good one. The Republicans have publicly played down previous losses with a range of excuses. Virginia, New Jersey are bluish states. I don't know, they all look bluish to me. Moore was fatally compromised in the general election. Luther Strange just as fatally in the primary. But no Republicans outside White House circle have ever sincerely disputed that Trump is the biggest underlying problem. Trump's personal unpopularity is a big part of it, and probably the biggest part, but it's more than that. It's also his inability and unwillingness to drive a focused, positive message for the GOP or to campaign for candidates in a way that isn't just political joyriding for his own amusement, which is a lovely way of pointing out that Trump lacks discipline and doesn't do the work, to follow up on my other comment there.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of it is that we're coasting because, it worked for us before, and now we're in trouble and we don't know what to do because, we've never done this before. Now, other problems
Seems
here.
That way. Yes.
What does it mean when the Republicans step back and look at this? I'll give you 2 tweets from ex-Representative David Jolly of Florida, who's turned out to be something of a truth teller.
He's already an ex. I forgot that. Okay.
Toward the bottom of the list there. The first one. Politics is about timing. 4 years ago tonight, I was elected in a district Obama won twice. Laura and I presume Laura is his wife.
Intern.
Yeah. You threw me off my game there. Laura and I have considered another run. But watching PA, this is not the year to re-enter politics. Trump should be primaried in 2020. Our focus tonight is on being part of that primary.
He should primary him. Everyone knows David Jolly.
Well, the point is that he's not running. People who thought about running are not running, looking at these results, and people who are in Congress may well, as Joe Biden says, one of those centrists who was there campaigning for Conor Lamb, told the crowd, this election result is going to mean a lot of retirements in the House.
Yeah, probably true.
Right, and so then another tweet to follow that up, David Jolly said, probably the primary takeaway tonight from Pennsylvania 18 is, Madam Speaker.
Okay, I'll take it.
Yeah, and that's his view, and that's my view too, which lends me to another discussion. It wasn't so much about whether or not you supported Conor Lamb. That happens all the time. Oh, I was there first. You weren't there at all. I was there in spirit. Yeah, well, you didn't prove it. Well, it's the same thing. Well, it's not the same thing. I mean, that happens all the time when people win or lose. What is interesting is there was this article I saw yesterday and challenged him on it online by Walter Shapiro. Mr. Walter Shapiro, he calls himself on Twitter. And when somebody does that, you have to give them the respect they deserve. I actually like Walter Shapiro. He's been writing for a long time. This time he's writing for The Guardian. And the title of his article is Why It's Time for Democrats to Ditch Nancy Pelosi.
What? Where?
The House Democratic leader is both unpopular and extremely well-known. That's a lethal combination in politics. When you're running as a Democrat in Donald Trump country, the name Nancy Pelosi is even more toxic than the letters CNN. In one of the more powerful TV ads in the run-up to Tuesday's special House election in Western Pennsylvania, the Democrat Conor Lamb earnestly declares, my opponent wants you to believe the biggest issue in this campaign is Nancy Pelosi. It's all a big lie. I've already said I don't support Nancy Pelosi. The Pennsylvania contest is largely symbolic since the district's going to disappear, but From Trump rallies to appearances by Joe Biden on behalf of Lamb, both parties are treating the race as if it were a dry run for November. And that's true. They threw a ton of resources into it, which brings us back to the Democrats' Nancy Pelosi problem. And, of course, I argued back, so you're talking about a Trump plus 20 district, which in effect is in Appalachia.
Yeah.
And Pelosi isn't the draw. And so what? I mean, there's 100 bluer districts, House districts, than this one. And John Heilman brought up another excellent point. I thought he phrased it better than anybody else. He basically said, look, what happened here is that the Republicans put up Rick Saccone against Conor Lamb, and they ran what they thought was going to be their November pitch, which was tax cuts and tariffs and Trump, and it didn't work.
Yes, that's true.
He went, and it was failing. Yeah. So they pulled out anti-immigration, Nancy Pelosi, and guns. Well, the guns things didn't work because Conor Lamb is an ex-Marine, and he's not on the same page as perhaps rank-and-file Democrats on guns, but that's okay. He's pro-abortion. That is to say, he's pro-choice.
Yeah.
Personally against, but, pro when it comes to law. He's moderate. And they tried to paint him as a liberal. That didn't work because he's not. Very insincere attack ads didn't work. And John Heilman's point is they used all of their best weapons, the anti-immigrant, the Nancy Pelosi thing, in a plus 20 Trump district, and it didn't work. Now, if it didn't work there, what are they supposed to do about the Hillary Clinton districts, the ones where Clinton won and there's a Republican sitting there? What are they supposed to do about true swing districts? Their tax thing isn't working. They can't run against Nancy Pelosi in a district that Hillary Clinton won. California, Illinois, New Jersey, that's supposed to be winners. What are they going to do? They have no plan. They have nothing. And that's why David Jolly stepped back and said, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, I guess so. I will say this, probably more photos and hairnets would be a great idea for these guys.
Well, that was a great thing, because Don Jr. went to, I guess, a chocolate factory and was photographed not only in a hairnet, but he was photographed taking questions from a giant chocolate bunny. Because the reporter was standing behind the bunny, and the only thing that you could see was the microphone sticking out from about where the bunny's hands were. And here's Don Jr. talking to the bunny.
I saw,
it was a hysterical picture.
I saw that circulate. I did not know the story. I was just like, oh, Darth is photoshopping chocolate bunnies in these pictures again.
So they were talking about, okay, so what's going to happen is Don Jr. is going to go, a big game hunting. He's going to bag one of these things. Just don't put it on the fireplace mantle, because that's not going to work.
That's true. That'll be a problem. And also,
cleanup time.
As trophies go, people come along and they eat the ears off of them. It's
exactly
just awful. And they're hollow inside, so shotgun will just destroy it.
Right. But, so anyway, I don't see the issue so much as whether or not this person or that person, Joe Biden certainly doesn't have that issue, was supportive of Conor Lamb enough and he won, and now what? It's rather, do you suggest that every campaigning Democrat has to therefore declare, I'm not for Nancy Pelosi in order to win? That was Walter Shapiro's point. I don't see it that way. I see it much more like if you're in Appalachia, you're going to have to run a candidate who says things and does things and is things that are more suitable to Appalachia. You might want to, for example, run, a Joe Manchin in West Virginia. That might go over better than Nina Turner. Just saying, in terms of your chances of winning.
Well, sure. And by the way, if you want to run, if you're Joe Manchin and you want to run against Nancy Pelosi, that's fine too, because you don't.
Yeah, because it really doesn't matter. He's in the Senate, right. But the whole mindset is, you have to show fealty. You don't. And we were having this discussion online because Dan Lipinski, who is going to be primaried from the left, and that's a good thing, in Illinois, a very conservative Democrat in the House, was very circumspect about whether or not he supported Nancy Pelosi, another guy who's running, who's not committed. And somebody asked Pelosi about him, do you still support Dan Lipinski? And she tight-lipped said yes, and then got off the podium and wouldn't answer any more questions about that.
All right.
And people were asking this morning on Daily Kos when we were chatting about the pundit roundup, did you see this? What does this mean? And I said, let me teach you some things that David Waldman taught me.
Oh, what are they? I don't remember.
Well, the speaker, the leader, is going to support incumbents.
Yes, true.
That's what they do. They don't get elected on their smile.
Right.
They get elected by being able to support, defend, block and tackle for, and raise money for incumbents. And if you don't support an incumbent, all the other incumbents are going to say, well, she hates me, so I'm next, so why should I support her? I mean, you can't do that as leader. You're right. Kind of committed to supporting your own caucus or conference. You have to. Now, if you can get small donor dollars from progressives, then maybe you don't need the speaker, but the speaker still needs you. So there's no way that you should go around expecting that, because of ideologic reasons, Nancy Pelosi is going to throw Dan Lipinski under the bus. That's not how politics works. And I claimed you taught me that.
I believe that I may have done that. Though I don't remember it because I was drinking so much at that time traveler party. I can hardly remember, but it's absolutely true. And there's a lot of that going around and a lot of that happening. We'll discuss it perhaps later on with Chuck Schumer as well. And now that
and I just told that's another one. Thanks for bringing that up after the break. But I just told him stop.
Okay.
Don't go there. That's not a thing to discuss.
Yeah. Well, we can have that discussion in private and then post it all over the internet. We'll be back in 2 minutes to discuss our plans to do that. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Good morning and welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Plenty more to go through here as we stated on our way out of the break, although I am still marveling at this picture of Rick Saccone in the hairnet. And I mentioned over the break to Greg, this I think goes in the Hall of Fame of campaign headgear no-nos, along with the Dukakis tank helmet, for anybody who remembers that. The shrinking numbers of us still alive. But there's lots of pushback, and as I mentioned up at the top of the show, plenty of fighting going on in the margins about who's liberal enough for the rest of America, conservative enough for this district, etc. And lots of pushback, not only on the House side but on the Senate side. Chuck Schumer getting a lot of flack because, of course, we'll now be seeing some new confirmation fights, but eventually Republican stampedes to support people to fill these cabinet positions that have been emptied lately and other high-ranking government positions that require Senate approval. And so far, everybody is, plenty of people upset that Chuck Schumer has had the audacity to say, rather than my staking out a position and then trying to force the Senate Democratic Caucus to adhere to it, I am going to talk to each of them and see how they would like to approach these fights, and then we'll, agree on a message, and I will announce that message. Spineless bastard.
Do you think the latter approach is better?
I think it happens whether it's better or not. Do I think it's better for the internal politics of the caucus? Yes.
It is indeed. I just want to point out to you that's exactly the complaint I had, if you recall, last week or 2 weeks ago on the show.
10 minutes.
When we were talking about Donald Trump and his listening experience with the victims and survivors of
yes.
Parkland, where you're better off listening to them and then determining based on how they feel where you're going to go, rather than trying to take your agenda and stick it on everybody. That's exactly what went wrong with a lot of the original 9/11 fund survivor stuff. And, when you're talking about things that matter to folks, you're exactly right. You're supposed to listen first and talk second, not the other way around. It's not a top-down driven thing. It can't be. You've got a bunch of senators, each of whom they think should be president themselves, and you can't just take them in a room and say, okay, let me explain to you this morning what you're going to do. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. That's I don't know. That's sometimes it's the Republican model. Very often
it is. They have much better message discipline, but they're also
crooks,
stupid.
Oh, right. Yes, criminals and imbeciles, and electing that many empty suits. It's great for centralized control, but that doesn't usually lead to good results. And it's even worse, of course, if you are corrupt and a bunch of jackasses. And
right. And I was watching Morning Joe this morning, probably not good for my blood pressure, but I always enjoy watching them when the Democrats have won.
Okay.
I like reading the Boston Globe when the Yankees win. It's just like one of those things.
Right.
So I was listening to John Meacham, who was on, who was properly, brought up a very good point and then made an idiot of himself over it. And the excellent point, Meacham is a historian and has written books about various figures, and he pointed out that, look, it does look like there's a Democratic wave, and this is part of it, and this election yesterday was part of it. But just because you have a wave in 2018 doesn't mean that you therefore win in 2020. And he talked about the fact that, for example, the Republicans had a wave during Obama's tenure, but Obama still was reelected, and the same thing was true with Bill Clinton. And I thought that was true, but missing the point, because he's talking about as if this were normal politics in a vacuum, as if Watergate-style corruption and investigations aren't happening, as if nothing's going to happen between now and 2020 with Robert Mueller. It's just like head in the sand stuff. And no, this is not normal. Trump isn't normal. The reaction to it isn't normal. And the investigations going on about criminality aren't normal. So, no, you can't just look at it and say, well, that's what, therefore, he's got an awfully good chance of being reelected in 2020. You can't just go by the Democratic wave in 2018. It might help to step back and look why there's a Democratic wave in 2018 before you start pontificating about what it means for 2020. And on that same show, Willie Geist made an equally moronic point, which was that Connor Lamb is a good fit for the district. That's fine. That's true. Absolutely.
Okay. That doesn't sound
and then went
right.
on to say, what people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer need to realize is that you can't have far left candidates who are running all of it. You got to have people that fit the district. And I'm thinking, so Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer don't know until you just told them that Connor Lamb is a reasonable fit for that district. This is news to them. Is that what you're saying?
I guess that is what he's saying.
I guess it is what he's saying. I said that was pretty dumb. Which reminded me of a whole entirely different moron discussion yesterday. But I'll just summarize that with a Jackie Calms tweet. Rex Tillerson seems to be barely containing himself as he was giving his farewell speech there, short of breath. And now he's summarizing highlights of his year as Secretary of State. More on that later.
Excellent.
I saw what she did there. And I think that pretty much summarizes it. You have to remember that Rex Tillerson told Donald Trump he was a freaking moron, or at least said that about him, and Trump has never forgiven him. And by the way, it's in the pundit roundup, but did you see the New York Post headline for today?
No. No. Okay.
All right. Well, I'll have to give that to you.
It's in the roundup. How did I not see it?
So let me give it to you there.
Where'd my roundup go? There it is. Okay. Well, I'll just look in the. Okay.
No, it's right at the bottom there.
Now I'll just look in the bottom.
Now you need some context, okay, for those of you who are under 40.
Okay.
Some years ago, there was a very, very famous New York Post headline. The tabloids in New York are famous for their fantastic headlines. The classic one is headless man found in topless bar, which actually happened and was headlined that way. But years and years and years ago, there was a Marla Maples boasts to her pals about Donald, the best sex I've ever had. That was a New York Post headline. Best sex I've ever had. Yes. It was obviously a plant by Donald Trump.
Yes. The headline is set up by it. It says Marla boasts to her pals, but
right.
We don't think so.
So today's headline in the New York Post is worst Rex he ever had.
So well done there. Worst Rex he ever. Lots of good Rex jokes out there.
Did I just stun you?
No.
And, it's a great headline because it plays on everything that tabloids do. So Tillerson is out, and what does it all mean? It means that Donald Trump is getting rid of everybody who doesn't agree with him.
Yes,
which should be
true.
A frightening thought. Donald Trump is saying, well, this is not going the way I want. I have to change everything. I'll fire Kelly. I'll fire McMaster. I don't know what I'm going to do about Mattis. I'm going to put in people who agree with me. I want yes people. I want yes men to surround me like I'm used to. That's the way I did my business before. Right. And then I'll deal with North Korea, Iran, and do whatever the heck I want. And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And if that doesn't terrify people, given that he knows nothing and can be flattered and cajoled, and whoever spoke to him last and can be bribed and all of that, if that doesn't frighten people, I don't know what does.
Well,
that's why yesterday's election was so important, because it suggests that even in Trump territory, that's not going to fly.
I hope that's the case, and there has to be some check on him, because the terms I put it in yesterday is he's firing and replacing all the people who would, for instance, be even remotely expected to sign a 25th Amendment document.
Pretty much.
Some kind. Anybody who would say, yeah, he really has lost his mind and I'll sign that, is on their way out and being. And now, I didn't really think any of them were going to do that, but I guess in his mind, if he thinks in his paranoid mind you're likely to do that, and I guess if you tell the press, I think the president is an effing moron, then okay, I'd have to say, you know what, that might be a guy who would do that, but it took him long enough to get rid of him.
Well, another way to look at it is that the election was yesterday, and Trump knew that his side was going to lose, so he needed to do some distracting stuff, so he fired Tillerson.
I guess that's one way.
And the other way to look at it is, of course, he lost. So does that mean today he fires Pence and Melania?
If he can, sure. Another way to look at it is he's got no idea what the hell's going on or how to do anything, and he gave in to his worst impulses and fired people, created more chaos, and did it via Twitter, which is very often when you poll even in Trump country, which is where this election was. Yes. And they say, the one thing I really don't like about the guy is the chaos and the tweeting and that kind of nonsense. I'm with him on policy so much insofar as he has any, but the tweeting and the fighting and the disruption and the chaos really bother me. And Trump said, to hell with it, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it first thing in the morning as people decide to go to the polls. And then I lost. That is weird.
Yeah, funny how that works. Although I don't know that people going to the polls were paying too much attention to what happened yesterday. People don't pay attention day to day the way we do.
I guess that's true, but I don't know. It seems like such an event when you
go to work and then you go vote, and who knows what was on Twitter? I happen to look at my phone, but other people don't necessarily do so.
That's true, but on the other hand, the CBS
and if they do,
News,
they're looking at the NCAA brackets.
Yeah, that could be. I'm behind on that. I need help there. But CBS News, breaking news, and they just have pictures of the president's tweets these days. It's hard to avoid it.
Hey, I'm working. I don't have that. It's all you liberal elites that have time to go look at that.
Yeah, news. Oh, well.
News. Anyway, so I'm going to sum up and just leave it at that and leave stuff for you and Joan to talk about. But before I go, I do have to point out a big event today. Mm-hmm. Okay, several big events. We do have the 10 o'clock 17-minute walkout in honor of Parkland.
Yes.
But we also have a big solar storm hitting the Earth today.
Solar storm.
Yeah, Pour Me Coffee tells us about this. Big solar storm hitting Earth today. Say your goodbyes and pray Ra spares you. What can you do? Wear the pendant, recite the incantation, supplicate yourself humbly and completely, not hard, folks. Work the basics. And my request in response was, would it work if I sacrifice a Republican congressman? We have too many of them. Nobody would notice.
Yes. Well,
we did one yesterday.
It's half of Ra, so maybe.
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I read it. I said, say goodbyes and, sacrifice your Republican congressman. Sacrifice him to Ra, not Zeus. Don't make a mistake. We don't want to be destroyed, and you don't want to be responsible for that. So I'll leave that with you, and pretty much that's my summary for today. I certainly, for those of you listening out there, it's always more fun to win than it is to lose.
That's usually so.
And so today feels especially good because, yes, it would have been a win for Democrats even if Conor Lamb had lost by 600 some odd votes. But it's even sweeter because it takes away the ability of Donald Trump to humble brag about it.
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't know. What if
he'll do it anyway, but he lies. Yeah. That's not the point. Oh. He would have been insufferable if Saccone had won and then he took credit for it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And he certainly would have taken credit for it. Rick Saccone
Everybody knows he would have. In fact, he would have been on Twitter already.
Right, that's true, but he's late to Twitter this morning, I think.
So what's he going to say?
I won.
Saccone lost, then I'm responsible for it because, in fact, that's true.
Well, all right, yeah, that's true. But how are we going to get him to say that what's true?
He's not, so he's going to say nothing, which is smart. I mean, politicians do that. Yeah. The absence of saying something, is perhaps smarter than actually saying something. There are rare occasions that Donald Trump applies that to himself. But, it's a lot sweeter to not have to listen to that sort of stuff this morning. So that's the main reason. But a close election in what was a plus 20 Trump district, there's no question that there's earthquakes going on. Dave Drucker is writing in the Washington Examiner about the Republican conference discussion that's going to take place today where leaders are going to inform their rank and file members that November is going to be a very rough election.
Okay.
Like they didn't know.
Well, we think that Chuck Schumer doesn't know anything, so maybe the rest of the Republican conference doesn't either. Could
and
be.
The other thing is, if there's 100 districts in play and not just 20, there's not enough money to go around. According to Dave Drucker, they're going to be told you have to run a real race.
That's going to be
difficult. You have to start campaigning early. You can't just coast.
No campaign in a box. What are they going to do? So this should be a hell of a cycle then for super crazy statements by clueless Republicans who haven't been given a proper script. But it's going to be hard to pay attention to those given the craziness that's coming from not the top of the ticket this time, but from Donald Trump. And they're going to, it'll be very interesting to see. They'll all take that, I'm sure, as license to say whatever crazy damn thing they can come up with. And Saccone lived up to that in the last couple of days of his race, too. And
saying lost. Democrats hated God and Trump and the country.
We just talked about
a Marine who he's running against is going to be in that position, which is the most idiotic thing. But they'll do it.
Yeah.
And it won't work.
Yeah. Right. You can't campaign out of the president's box or what you think might be in the president's box based on what you read in the newspapers because he's an empty-headed idiot and we don't know whether he doesn't have any plan in saying it. Usually the people who put the boxes together have plans. Terrible plans, but they're plans.
But they're still plans. All right. With that, I will take my leave, but I hope that gives you enough material to talk a little bit about whatever you want for the rest of the hour. Because the nice thing about the show is I have no idea what that's going to be.
Yeah, me neither. And after the show, I still have no idea. That's why Scott Anderson tells me what I did.
Jones on later?
Yes. Well, that's
Say
my
hi.
plan. Yes. Okay, I'll do that. We'd like to.
Idaho was it, right?
Yeah, right. That's the one. Illinois.
One of the states that starts with I. Very, very strong red Trump state. I don't think that's too much in danger of changing one way or the other. But, it's going to be a very interesting November. That's all I can say. Take care, and I will be back on Monday, and we'll talk again.
Oh, are you not in tomorrow, Thursday?
Or you forget Thursday. I'll be here tomorrow, too.
Okay, we forgot what day it was.
Whatever.
Okay, Well, you would have been there.
I was up late. Hey, you know what the other fun thing was watching on MSNBC was Steve Kornacki. Did you hear about that?
I only saw people tweeting about, like, what's going on.
He was like really so super excited. There was one point he's trying to keep up with the big board with the numbers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's got a calculator in each of his hands, or a smartphone in each of his hands, and he's got a pen in his mouth. And he's trying to talk to Brian Williams about what the numbers mean, and it's not coming out well because he's got one of these big, markers in his mouth.
Oh,
So he spits the marker on the floor and just goes on with his segment, and then goes and picks it up later.
Well, that's very raw and
it was very raw. Everybody's laughing and they're saying, basically, your significant other should look at you the way Steve Kornacki looks at elections. I mean, he was just so into it. It was just so much fun watching.
I like that. I didn't see it, but I like the sound of it. All I saw was, tweets like, is he okay? Do we need to collect him? And,
he's talking faster and faster, and he's trying to keep up, and the numbers are coming in. It's 95% in, and what does it mean? Well, there's this, there's that, there's this. But he's got a pen in his mouth. Over here, number 2. It was really very funny.
I imagine that's what was going on with the Daily Kos elections guys, but they're not on camera.
Right, so it seemed much more staid and much calmer in terms of what was going on. Yeah. But a lot of us were just sitting there hitting the refresh button, and then learning that if you follow it online on Twitter, you get a lot faster information than you do if you watch the cable channels, who seem to be about 10 minutes behind what you already know.
Yeah, that's true. I even get information faster watching Twitter than hitting the refresh button for myself, because by the time if I just read it, they're all out there hitting the refresh button. It's just one big refresh button, Twitter. And everybody else, the other 1,000 people who are doing it, are just telling me what the results are anyway. Just as I said at the beginning of the show, I turned on Twitter after getting done with the evening's activities. Everybody told me what was going on, and then jokingly saying, so I wonder if the election is close.
So G. Elliott Morris called it first. He was working at Decision Desk HQ, but just on his own Twitter said, this looks like there's no way that Saikon's going to catch up. And then Dave Wasserman did. Redistrict, National Journal guy, and then Cook Political, and then you're just watching these prognosticators, and then finally the network. But it took MSNBC until 5 a.m. to do that. I didn't stay up till 5 a.m., but I was up at 5 a.m. and I just saw it come through. And, it was fun, and you had a good sense that, okay, this is going to be a nail biter, but it's one that we're going to win. And those are fun to watch. Yeah.
Right. The difficult ones are, maybe there's 400 absentee votes we can pick up.
But it's not likely. It's looking less likely. This was, we're ahead, and nobody really sees a path for this other guy to do it, but let's just, see if, there's more votes in, and it looks like we were right about that. Kornacki, go to the board and add them up. So... Fun times. Take care, and yes, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Excellent. Right. Terrific. Thank you, Greg. And, we'll march on from there. Let's see. I was just checking in to see whether the president was up. The guy playing the president is there, and he has tweeted twice this morning, and, of course, nothing about the election. The last that he tweeted about the election would have been, early yesterday. He went to California yesterday to look at some wall prototypes, and that seems to have been largely a waste of time and a bust, but it was like another rally for him. And then he spoke to the troops, and then he said he wanted to launch them all into space or something like that. He decided that should be a space force of some kind, which I think he actually described as like the Army and the Navy, but for space. It's like Uber, but for whatever. This is the Army and Navy, but for space. We do, of course, have a United States Air Force Space Command, and they, I guess, do, well, whatever it is that we're doing in space is generally in their purview. We're not launching soldiers into space to have, Starship Trooper wars at this point, and maybe that's what he has in mind. I'm sure that is what he has in mind. And it's not entirely clear that the U.S. Air Force Space Command would be in charge of that command. But, he's always thinking ahead. We got to give that to Donald Trump. But this morning he's been tweeting about his own nonsense, his own brand of nonsense. The economy is great and it's my doing, whatever. Let's see. Hundreds of good people, including very important ambassadors and judges. He's complaining about being blocked or slow-walked by the Democrats in the Senate. No mention of the fact that they blocked or slow-walked a Supreme Court nomination for a year, because why would I acknowledge that? Many important positions in government are unfilled because of this obstruction. Worst in U.S. history, which really is on you because there's no filibuster anymore. So why are you the worst in U.S. history at getting people into your jobs? And why are they always dropping out with criminal clouds over their heads along the way as well? Let's see. And then a brag about the economy, which isn't particularly well-founded. And then that's it. So that's it for the morning. No anger tweeting about having lost, and I guess that's an improvement. He just walks away from these things. He doesn't really care. And by, afternoon, he'll be calculating how can he tweet that he never really supported Rick Saccone in the first place anyway, etc., etc. All right. Let's see. What else have we got to recap? And, of course, we have Joan McCarter coming up in the second hour. I say that with some confidence because we always have her on Wednesdays, and I haven't been emailed that I'm unable to make it today. So we are going to take that as a yes, and usually that is then followed up by not only is that a yes, but I'm listening and I'm getting ready to come on. So I'm saying with high confidence, 95% sure that that I'm right in saying that Joan will show up later today and update us on all things. Well, really, whatever the hell she feels like at this point, because you could go in any number of directions. Let's see. Before she gets here, anything that we need to throw up in your way here so that you cannot claim ignorance later on? Let's see. Oh, yes. Well, this was an interesting tidbit. A lot of Twitter discussion about a lawsuit filed by the family of Seth Rich. Alleging all kinds of amazing things, but generally speaking, alleging not only a brutal program of coordinated harassment by Fox News writers, producers, the on-air personalities, but also the White House was behind the coordination. The one quick hit I'll give you here, tweeted by our friend NYC Southpaw, says, check out Allegation 73 in the Rich family's complaint against Fox News filed yesterday. So, long story short on that one is, like I said, a coordinated program to push out essentially the fake news story that the DNC was somehow, the Democrats were somehow behind his death. And he's got two screen grabs here from allegation 69 through 74, but he calls our attention to number 73, which is, and I don't know all the players and who's who here, but 73 is, according to Wheeler, on May 14th, 2017, Butowski informs Wheeler that President Donald Trump had read a draft of the Zimmerman Fox article, that is to say, the one alleging that Democrats were behind Seth Rich's murder, and wanted it published, quote, immediately. This is a rather stunning allegation to make and to say that that President Trump had a direct hand in essentially terrorizing this family, which is an astounding thing to find out and to see established, though honestly it's not that astounding to learn after the fact. Once it settles in and you say, Donald Trump really did have a hand in that, you say, that guy really is something of a jackass. And I guess I can believe it. All right, let's see. Other sort of random items to bring you up to date on. Here's a wacky story that actually Daniel Dale brought to my attention. I wasn't expecting it to come from him here, but you may have seen this one. I had to pass this one on, and then many people saw it when Daniel Dale brought it up and said, this is rather astonishing. Here's a story from Alabama which the county name here, I'm going to guess, is Etowah. I think that's how they pronounce it down there. Etowah sheriff pockets $750,000 in jail food funds and buys a $740,000 beach house. You're never going to believe this one. It's a hell of a story. I'm actually interested in it. I'd love to know this is something I'd really like to know what Donald Trump thinks about this. Connor Sheets is the name of the reporter here working for Alabama, AL.com. Which newspaper as part of that consortium that is, I'm not sure, but perhaps we'll figure it out by the end, although his email address is al@al.com. Here's the story. In September, Etowah County Sheriff Todd Entrekin, I'm guessing again at the pronunciation here, Entrekin, Entrekin. I have no idea where he puts the accent. Todd Entrekin and his wife Karen purchased an orange 4-bedroom house. That is unusual enough all by itself, an orange house, but an orange 4-bedroom house with an in-ground pool and canal access in an upscale section of Orange Beach, I guess hence the orange house, for $740,000. But just to clarify, just as we head into the break here, I know this is going to keep you guessing during the break. I didn't misread that, unless it's a typo. It's lowercase o orange, but uppercase Orange Beach. I think somebody just thought it would be clever to paint their house orange, the color orange, in orange. And it wasn't that they purchased an orange house, capital O. So it really was orange, lowercase. $740,000 was the price tag on that one. Oops, I'm behind on my music here. To finance the purchase, this is where it really gets crazy, Entrekin got a $592,000 mortgage from the People's Bank of Alabama, according to real estate records. Well, actually, the crazy part will come after the break, but it's it's certainly crazy at this point to say, well, how much could the sheriff of Etowah County really be making to take out a $600,000 mortgage? We'll find out how he did that after the break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. Just that short break that we take at the top of the hour, and I actually remembered it this time, even if we did start the music late. So I gave things away a little bit. I'm sure you weren't in that much suspense waiting over the break because I read you the headline, but I wanted to give you the mechanics. Surely you knew that there was something more spectacular than a local sheriff down in Alabama finding a way to take out a $600,000 mortgage on an orange house. How did he do it? Well, the hint was in the headlines. The home is one of several properties that he owns with a total assessed value of more than $1.7 million that the couple own together or separately in Etowah and Baldwin counties. Now, are they taking late night television infomercial seminars about how to flip houses? That could be. No, that's not the answer. Some Etowah County residents do question how a county sheriff making a 5-figure annual salary can afford to own multiple houses, including one worth nearly $750,000. But ethics disclosure forms that Entrekin filed with the state reveal that over the past 3 years, he has received more than $750,000 worth of additional, quote, compensation from a source he identified as food provisions. And the answer of how he got his hands on this funding, this money, is actually sort of simple. I wouldn't say straightforward, but it's simple to understand. But he certainly, he dives in head first and really makes it even more complex by the way he handles this money. This is a very bizarre story. Entrekin did not deny that he received the money when asked about it via email last week. Ethics forms he filed in previous years do not list any income from such a source. Here's where we get the explanation. Entrekin told AL.com last month that he has a personal account that he refers to as his food provision fund. Is that interesting? Is that why do I have one of those? Do I just say I do eat and some of my money is used for food? Well, it's not food provision for him. It's more interesting than that. Etowah County resident Matthew Qualls said that in 2015, Entrekin paid him to mow his lawn, via checks All right, that's a little old-fashioned. With the words, Sheriff Todd Entrican Food Provision Account printed in the upper left corner. This sounds like some kind of interesting account. Who keeps something like that? And how do you buy lawn service with a food provision account? What is going on here? AL.com viewed a photograph of one such check, so they know it exists, unless it was Photoshopped. It's all fake news. The money in the account, that's what we want to know about. The money in the account was allocated by federal, state, and municipal governments. He's getting lawn service with federal, state, and municipal government money. Why did they give him the money? To feed inmates in the Etowah County Jail. Why do they give the money to the sheriff as opposed to saying, bill us, or we'll send it to the county and the county pays for food? I don't know what their system is down there, but they begin to explain it in this article. You got to hear this. Now, I got to read it to you. You want to hear it. It's not like you're avoiding the story, right? The money in the account was allocated by federal, state, and municipal governments to feed inmates in Etowah County Jail or buy houses with. But it was not used for that purpose and was instead personally pocketed by Entrican. How could you even have a system where this is possible? Answer, we're Alabama. In regards to feeding of inmates, we utilize a registered dietitian to ensure adequate meals are provided daily, Entrican said Sunday via email. That would be by way of saying, yes, we do feed the inmates in Etowah County Jail. I didn't steal all of the money. Now, check this out. As you should be aware, and I agree, now you should be aware of this, although why anyone feels like they should have been aware of it before this story, anyway, I have no idea. I mean, surely the sheriff should be aware of it, but now we all feel like we've been taken for a ride, so let's get aware. As you should be aware, Alabama law is clear as to my personal financial responsibilities in feeding of inmates. What? I mean, I guess I'll take your word for it. Alabama law assigns to the responsibility for the costs of feeding inmates the sheriffs personally? I mean, it's one way of allocating the responsibility. I don't think that would have made any sense in any modern context. Maybe they did it the first time Alabama organized as a state. They just said, you know what? The sheriffs will feed their inmates and then they'll bill the state and the state will send the money for the feeding of inmates. But even so, if you spend the money, then the state pays you, then it comes out in the wash, right? You're not enriching yourself. They said, well, of course it took a while, but they would, if that was the way they were going to work the system, eventually you're going to find a sheriff who's going to say, what if I feed the inmates $10 worth of food, but bill the state for $1,000 worth of food? Then they send the money to me, and because I'm personally responsible for paying them, no one's any the wiser when I deposit their check in my bank account, or if I really want to look like I'm a professional, in my food provision account, so that it totally looks like I'm not stealing it, but then I would get to keep the other $990, right? Or if I did it, there would be no way of auditing me, or at least no immediate indication that I needed to be audited. So I guess they invented that system and they went along with it. How antiquated is that? As you should be aware, Alabama law is clear as to my personal financial responsibilities in the feeding of inmates. You would think sheriffs would be lobbying to change that, but I guess they found out they could make money this way. Regardless of one's opinion of this statute, until the legislature acts otherwise, the sheriff must follow the current law. This law doesn't sound like a smart one. Many Alabama sheriffs contend that the practice of keeping excess, quote unquote, excess inmate feeding funds for themselves is legal under a state law passed before World War II. And I guess that counts as antiquated, but I was thinking more along the lines of like 1800s. But all right. Back in Alabama, pre-World War II, I'm sure the monetary system was, let's say, less robust and less robust record keeping, maybe, and less robust in the transfer of funds, the instantaneous transfer of funds, than it might be today. So many Alabama sheriffs do contend that that is legal. And I guess nobody has anything to say about it to this point. Yet, in a number of counties, including Jefferson and Montgomery, any money allocated to sheriffs for feeding inmates that is not used for that purpose is instead turned over to the county government, which is probably what everybody thought was happening, except Todd Entricken and his lawn service guy. Entricken reported on forms that he filed with the Alabama Ethics Commission that he made, quote, more than $250,000 each of the past 3 years via the inmate feeding funds. And apparently it's not one where you spend money and then you send them the receipts and then they send you that amount. It's, I'm going to spend $1 million this month, so send it to me and we'll see what happens. I don't know how they get this system. Tom Albritton, the executive director of the Ethics Commission, said via email that the state does not require public officials to disclose exactly how much more income they received from a single source beyond the $250,000 threshold, which he said is specifically set in the statute. That at least accounts for why, if he earned $750,000, he didn't say, I earned $750,000. He simply says, I earned more than $250,000. The real question is, why do you run your inmate feeding program like this? Or why do you have an inmate feeding thing at all? Anyway, Entricken's annual salary as sheriff, $93,178.80, according to Jeff Little, Human Resources Director for the Etowah County Commission. Rainbow City Police Chief Jonathan Horton, Rainbow City, a real name of a town there, who worked for the Etowah County Sheriff's Office under former Sheriff James Hayes, is currently opposing Entricken in this year's race for sheriff. One plank of Horton's campaign platform is a pledge not to keep any inmate feeding funds, so that might take care of the problem. I believe the funds belong to the taxpayers, because they do, and any excess funds should go toward things that benefit the taxpayer, he said in a March 1 phone interview. There's been a tremendous amount of money left over that shouldn't be used as a bonus check. So let's see a little bit more about this story. Why not? It's pretty crazy. Entricken does not use the funds allocated for inmate feeding to purchase food trays and certain food service supplies for the Etowah County Jail, which the county instead pays contractors to supply, according to county records. Etowah County currently has an open bid posted on its website for a contractor to provide food trays for the jail. The county awarded a fiscal year 2014-2015 contract to provide the trays to a Birmingham company called Design Specialties Incorporated. Some of the supplies the county does provide for the jail. That may be one of them. David Akins, Chief Administrative Officer for Etowah County, said when asked in a phone interview whether the county pays a contractor to supply the jail with food trays. He declined to provide official information about county contracts and for jail-related items. The county awarded contracts for food service supplies, -jail. That's the what they wrote on the line item there, for fiscal years 2011 and 12 and 2014 and 15 to Osborne Brothers, a Gadsden company. Information about the specific supplies the company provides, not publicly available, but Osborne Brothers didn't respond to requests for comment, but they contributed $2,000 to Entricken's campaign under the name Osborne Food Service in 2013. Horton says that Hayes used the funds he was allocated for feeding inmates to pay for trays and other kitchen supplies. I worked for the previous sheriff, Sheriff Hayes, and my understanding was that the sheriff personally owned and bought and purchased all the trays and utensils, all the hardware, and handled the operation of everything to do with food in the jail, Horton said. Seems like an extraordinarily dumb setup that's just ripe for corruption. And guess what? Voila! It has become corrupt. Entricken provided a 2-sentence response to a series of detailed questions about the county contracts for jail needs and campaign contributions from companies that provide products and services to the county. You should understand that in the state of Alabama, the sheriff does not have the legal authority to enter into contracts, he said via email. According to law, contractual authority is the responsibility of the county commission. I do not know how that's responsive to anything, but that's what they said. On February 1st, Entrican's campaign received one of its largest single contributions to date, $5,000 from Network Communications International Corporation, NCIC. Etowah County awarded the Texas company a contract to provide inmate telephone services on September 20th, 2016. NCIC didn't respond to a request for comment, but we have discussed in the distant past what a scam the telephone services in jails can be. I wouldn't be surprised if they were kicking him back $5,000 in campaign funds from that scam, if there is one. Chevrolet of Boaz contributed $500 to Entrican's campaign in October of 2013, another $1,000 in 2017. I don't know whether that leads to anything. We should see whether did the county jail. Yes, in fact, here we are. After a couple of contributions, Etowah County awarded Chevrolet of Boaz a contract to provide the sheriff's office with a 1,500 crew cab four-wheel drive truck or comparable vehicle. Guess what? They didn't respond to any requests for comment either. So it's the article goes on at some considerable length. I really think we can pretty much be done with that nonsense. But what a situation they've created for themselves down there in Alabama. I guess one thing at a time. You got to dig up the antiquated, wacko corruption systems that they have there. I actually would love to know, kind of, except I'm afraid of what the answer is. What does Donald Trump think of something like this? Clearly, you would think, I mean, it's obvious that he would say, that's outrageous, we can't have that. But you also know that if Donald Trump were somehow taken a different path in life and was instead sheriff of Etowah County, Alabama, he would totally be taking this money. It's totally legal. It says right here, everybody knows that the Alabama law is 100% clear that instead of feeding people who are in jail, I should buy houses with the money. But what a weirdo system this is, that they still at this point in time are like, yeah, you're sheriff, you run the jails, it's paid for by the county, but here's the way we want to work it. You buy everything. Just buy jail cells, buy trucks, guns, food, whatever. Tell us how much it costs, and we'll send you a personal check made out to you, and you do what you want. Do you want to see any receipts? No. Really, though, back in, pre-World War II Alabama, why, no chance they had receipts for anything, right? I'm sure they didn't even have paper at the time. So you just go ahead and do that. Of course they did, but no one. What a weird thing to turn up. I mean, with all the corruption that we could be focusing. I wanted to bring you some real good old-fashioned, down-home American heartland corruption to make you feel like, really nostalgic for those days when America was great the first time. We're coming back. All right. Joan McCarter is here, sheriff of what county are you in, Joan?
Ada.
Ada County. Wow, that sounds. I ate a county too, and boy, am I stuffed. Anyway,
Ada.
Hi-yo.
ADA.
Oh, okay, I got it. I'm first and foremost a dad, and I needed to make a dad joke just to transition to this. So what a system.
That's a dad joke, but actually going back to that story, our Rebecca Pilar Bookwalter Posa.
Oh.
Boy, that's a mouthful of a username.
That is bigger than we used to.
Who writes on judicial issues. I flag that for there are 49 sheriffs being sued, I guess, in Alabama.
All in Alabama.
This.
Yeah? How many counties do they think they got in Alabama?
Draft.
That's an amazing setup. And I guess I can see how that just continues to happen because sheriffs are like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So they don't do anything. And, of course, if you attack them about it, oh, my God, they're our first response. Why are you not saluting? Thank you for your service. It's like you hate America, But I would be very curious. Certainly if the guy's a Democrat, Donald Trump would think it was outrageous. But it's easy enough for him to say. I'm curious about, because that seems like the sort of thing. If it were on Fox and Friends, he'd be invading Alabama over this. Even if the guy is a Republican. If he didn't donate to Donald Trump for president.
No, I'm sorry. Trump would not care about this issue at all.
I don't know. I'm curious about it. If it were presented as an outrage, I guess he'd be outraged. If it were presented as, you don't think so?
No.
Oh.
No.
He did not. The guy didn't buy a Trump condo. He just bought a regular house.
I don't think there are Trump condos in Alabama, are there?
I don't know. It was an orange house. Does that count?
Anyway, you can read about that coming up from
Good.
Rebecca
Well, she knows what she's
at
talking
Daily
about.
Kos.
Well, there you go. We're all becoming outraged slowly at this story. This is really amazing. So every once in a while, you got to turn your eye, lift up the corner of the rug somewhere else, and guess what? There's corruption underneath.
Guess what?
Yeah. What a weird thing. Okay. Well, surely there are bigger stories in the world, or even in the country. We can limit things that way. But I'm glad this is getting some attention too, because it's crazy. What are they making you do? Or do you get to set your own agenda today?
Well, because it's a day at Daily Kos I'm writing about Obamacare.
Oh, all right.
Actually, this is a good one.
Yeah, we had a little discussion
Obamacare
about that.
and the special election in Pennsylvania last night.
Yes.
Because
Okay.
it turns out public policy polling decided, hey, you know what would be fun? Let's do some exit polling of voters in Pennsylvania's 18th district, while
Yeah.
the 18th district of Pennsylvania still exists.
It
This
hasn't got
was
much
its
time left.
last gasp, by the way.
Yes, that I
It'll
did see
be
that printed out.
entirely new in November.
Yeah, so everything gets redrawn, and I guess whatever town Connor Lamb lives in, he can decide whether he's going to stand for election in that new district.
I think he probably will.
I
But
hope so.
what was remarkable that PPP found in their exit poll was that healthcare was among the top issues for 52% of the voters.
Yes, Greg was excited about that as well.
15% of them said it was most important, and 37% said it was very important, and they are not at all happy. This is the Trump 20-point plus district. They are unhappy about sabotage. Very unhappy about sabotage. They disapprove of it, 53 to 39%, the efforts of Republicans to repeal. And 48% think that they are trying to undermine and sabotage the law since they can't appeal it. And only 33% of independent voters think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
44% of voters support Obamacare.
And remember what the district is that we're talking about, and that becomes...
Remember what the district is that we're talking about.
Now, Pennsylvania folks, have they gotten screwed worse in the sabotage than some of the other states? I mean, it's down south, they're really going crazy trying to undermine things.
Not
and I don't
really.
know. It wasn't mitigated at all.
They've got Medicaid expansion.
Okay.
And, everybody sees increasing premiums. I think this is a fight that people are just sick of. They want everybody to move on. And if you look at national polling from Kaiser Family Foundation for, they do their monthly health survey poll where they check in on Obamacare. For the past, I would say 3 years.
Yes.
Generally, easily 2 years, voters have been saying, stop it. Just stop it. This is the law. Go on, do other stuff, make it better. Stop trying to repeal it. We're sick of that.
All right.
And I think we saw that last night in Pennsylvania.
Well, we've been waiting on that.
In deep red Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Well, I was just a little bit curious in my question about whether there will be districts which might not even be as red necessarily in terms of the makeup of the electorate, but where voters have gotten a still worse deal in.
I'm sure there will be. If you move to, say, Ohio, where they've had problems keeping providers because of the sabotage, where they've, in some counties, have just one person or one company, rather, selling Obamacare policies in the market. So, I think a lot of folks probably do see the sabotage, but I think in general, they're sort of, hey, let's do something else.
Yeah. Well,
And
we can
what's
be
important
fatigued about
to
these.
note, too, I added to this, there are 119 Republican House seats right now that are bluer than Pennsylvania 18.
Yeah, a lot of people talking about that because, I mean, I guess if you can pull a miracle in one of them, you can hope for it in a lot of them. And I understand that now the big talk was, Devin Nunes's district is less red than that. That definitely came up. So how many now? 20?
119.
Oh.
119.
Okay. Well, that's a lot.
That's
It's
a
amazing what can
lot.
happen if people show up, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I guess that once again, we're back to our task being A, turnout, and B, access. And let's make sure, that the voter suppression efforts that they've been banking on since forever, we do whatever we can to suppress the suppression to the extent that that's possible. If we can't get them to, we're never going to get them to, come to their conscience about that and just step out of the way, obviously. We're going to have to find ways of steamrolling right over them. But
just
we can
like
do
that.
Well, and it's not a sure thing. And a special election is different, and you can't snap your fingers and make it work 120 times. And it does have something to do with the candidate, and it does have something to do with the focus. But the opportunities are there.
You can't deny that there is a wave building.
Yes.
Republicans are not in secret anyway. I mean, you get a lot of, well, yeah, he's a Republican. If he'd run as a true Democrat, never mind that he's pro-choice,
yes,
not personally, but supports pro-choice policies, supports universal health care and unions. He's totally a Republican.
Yeah, other than those things. And a closing speech that was, by many accounts, rather rousing and, very, very much democratic. No doubt left there. But I don't know. Yeah, there's lots of, I guess there's nothing else to do.
Here's what they're saying. Yes. We saw Rebecca Berg tweeting this earlier today. NRCC Chairman Stivers tells Republican members in closed-door meeting, PA18 is, quote, a wake-up call. If you're getting outraised, this is a wake-up call. Oh. Prepare to bear down. What I think we're going to see is they're preparing to exit. I think we're going to see more retirements in the coming weeks.
Well, I hope so. That would strengthen our hand. I do have the comment here, Robert Hudson pointing out. Yes, it's true that there are, of course, the 120 or so Republican House seats that went for Trump by less than Pennsylvania 18. But, and this is a good point, many of those would potentially have incumbents running for re-election. Not the case, obviously, in the special election in Pennsylvania 18. And that is important. Also,
it's very important to know. Yeah, very important to remember.
So thank you for
But those incumbents
of that. Yes,
are going to be just a little bit scared today.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot less cushion as well. And so, as we're pointing out, if everybody is less Republican than that district, factoring that in and then factoring in the incumbency advantage, does the incumbency advantage overcome the swing that some districts can produce if the conditions are right? And that's the big question.
And, there are, 37? Are we at 37 retirements? Republican retirements?
I'll take your word
It's something like that.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Most of them in those 119 seats. So.
Yeah. So, as that number continues to grow, that gets incumbents out of the way. And now might be also a good time to point out the tweet I grabbed last night from Maura Quint, who actually lists as among her credits contributor to The Onion, saying, just a reminder, no matter what happens in Pennsylvania 18, the election's only happening because an anti-abortion family values Republican was caught trying to get the woman he had an affair with to have an abortion. Oh, that's true. What happened to that? Why isn't there an incumbent in that seat? Oh, well, that might be a more widespread problem for current Republican incumbents than than we thought.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we do have our break.
But Secon was, he was kind of an incumbent.
Yes,
He's
I guess.
the legislator from that legislative district. Not the congressional district and legislative district don't overlap entirely.
Right, but he was a known quantity.
He's known in the area.
That's true, and as they got to know him better, they decided they were less and less interested in that guy after all. We're going to take our quick break here for 2 minutes or so, and then regroup and come back and hit you with our final segment after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is still with us, and now heading into our closing arguments, I guess, as it were. We've got half an hour left in the show, so there's still plenty of time to check in on all the other stories besides the cheating sheriffs of Alabama and what the hell was going on in central western Pennsylvania. There's this whole other country. And some nationwide and happenings of national import going on right now, as you were reminding me during the break. Student walkout today.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I was just trying to answer
okay. Is there some breaking news?
A question from Chris about the banking bill.
Oh, okay. Do you know the answer?
Sorry.
That's okay.
We're going on in the background because people are demanding things of me.
Sure. Well, you're in high demand. Maybe we can pose the question to the audience, and they can all tweet him answers. What do you think?
Yes.
So, all right. The banking bill, is that...
the rollback of Dodd-Frank.
Okay. Yes.
Bill that I don't understand why 17 members of the Democratic caucus are supporting.
Yeah.
16 Democrats and Angus King.
Okay. Yeah, I did see, I had a note earlier in the show from Rebecca Romans, I guess when we were talking about the special election at the top of the show and saying, reminding, we all rejoiced when Doug Jones won in Alabama, and now here he is helping the Republicans overturn Dodd-Frank. But yeah, one of the many things that occasionally Democrats and Republicans alike, I guess any politician will disappoint you from time to time. That's a pretty big disappointment. But again, you weren't going to do a tremendous amount better initially in Alabama.
Yeah.
And, all right. Well, I guess at this point we don't even get, though, the consolation prize of being able to say, well, the, majority leader is Chuck Schumer, or any Democrat for that matter. But, so what is going on?
What is so discouraging about this bill is they keep selling it as helping community banks and credit unions, when it really sort of lifts regulations on 25 of 38 biggest banks. The Congressional Budget Office has said, yes, this is going to make it more likely that we have to have another big bailout of a bank if this passes.
Sounds bad.
The thing, though, that is really frustrating to me, extremely frustrating to me, is that it's racist, essentially. It lifts requirements on something like 85% of mortgages that banks and credit unions making loans making mortgage loans have to track demographic information. They have to show, not only under the Community Reinvestment Act requirements of reporting the race, gender, and zip code of the people they're lending to, to try to show if they're redlining in giving mortgages, but what the terms of the loans are. They're supposed to record all of this data so that prosecutors can look for redlining and say, you are discriminating, you are illegally making mortgages harder to get and more expensive and predatory toward people of color. They're lessening that requirement for about 85% of mortgages. And they've got a fig leaf for this. They're saying, well, okay, we'll fix this. We'll say if a lender gets 2 essentially demerits under reviews from the CRA, then we'll impose those on them again. Those reviews happen once every 3 years. So for 6 years, lending institutions will be able to discriminate against people of color and get away with it.
What sort of excuse is there for not imposing the requirement? Are they really saying, well, it's so costly for us to know the mailing addresses of people we're lending money to?
Seriously.
These
institutions
have to know that
are completely
if you want to be
computerized.
paid.
They have all of this information. It isn't going to be that hard to get a report out about that information. I don't understand why this is such an onerous burden
I am not
on these lending institutions that it has to be lifted in this repeal bill.
I'm constantly surprised by, the details of logistics. And you could certainly convince me, we're actually spending, I don't know, $200,000, $500,000 compiling the reports just because there's lots of names and everything. But I'm pretty certain that almost every loan comes with a recording somewhere of who did I give that money to, how much are they supposed to pay me, and what's their address in case they don't.
Yeah, and what are the terms of this loan?
That way you're being...
How many
I know
years?
You know the terms.
They know that. Interest rate, they know that. All of that is recorded.
Yeah, so I'm a little baffled at what the big burden is, but I'm sure they could come up with an explanation. But then it's like, again, you're collecting the information, you're computerizing it. It won't even cost you ink, really. You can email it to me, where I'll print it at the central office here, and we'll use government ink to print
here's the
it
bigger question: why are 17 Democrats going along with it?
I guess that's another big question. I don't know what. That's probably not the provision that makes it work for them, but obviously you're talking about people who are raising a tremendous amount of money from financial interests, or maybe came from the financial sector, or buy into the argument that what's good for the financial sector is good for America. But do you have a ready list of names? If you don't, I'm sure it'll be in a post later on. So we'll get that list, right? Okay.
It's everybody basically running for re-election.
So that would seem
this term, and a whole bunch more of them.
Oh, well, so that would indicate that probably campaign contributions did have something major to do with it. But still, the idea of major financial institutions cutting off senators is very difficult to grasp, even if they didn't vote your way on a financial services bill. Setting a senator loose and making them angry at you is very rarely a good idea for such a highly regulated industry. But
yes,
okay, we'll get that list, and everyone will be talking about it.
No, that's Pompeo. Sorry, that's the 14 Democrats who supported Pompeo for.
The other
trying to keep track of a lot of stuff right now.
Yeah. Oh well, we can certainly switch that as a topic. I'm sure we'll find your list if you've posted it. We'll grab it and we'll share it with everybody. And I have a feeling you probably have something to say about some of these nominations that are going to be coming up as well. You can't just move cabinet posts, right? You got to go through the whole process again. Although it's not nearly as arduous, I guess, because they feel like they have vetted you for one thing. On the other hand, I guess if you're moving up from, say, deputy director over at CIA to CIA director, you might get a tougher look.
You're going to get a tougher look, definitely. And I think that I can't ever remember her name because it just came up yesterday. Starts with an H.
Haspel?
Haspel. She's going to have some problems, I think.
Okay, yeah.
As she should.
Right.
Being the architect of black sites and of torture.
Yeah, well, they should interrogate her. They should enhanced interrogate her for the position. I mean, we should really scrutinize her.
She has never faced a Senate panel. She has never had to have a confirmation here.
Is that right? Not even as deputy, I guess, not as deputy director, huh?
Nope.
Is that, okay. Well, then, good. We have our first opportunity to really press her on these things. First of all, there should be no chair for her at the hearing, even if it's an extended hearing, because as you know, Donald Rumsfeld says that's not a problem. That would be a great thing to do. I mean, a little rotten, mean for even a Democratic Senate, but let's see. If I were there and I didn't care about anything, including being reelected, I'd say no chair for the witness table. Surely she doesn't think that's a problem. Just wear sensible shoes. So, okay.
So we've already seen the first words that you hear out of people are Feinstein saying, she's very well respected in the CIA. But then you've got Democratic senators saying no very loudly, very clearly, including Wyden from Oregon and Heinrich from New Mexico and others, White House, others have been joining them saying, this is not good.
It isn't.
She could be in trouble. That might be one that actually we can stop.
That would be nice to see. And I guess theoretically you'd maybe see some cooperation from Republicans who have complained about torture in the past, although that's chiefly McCain.
McCain has already said, no, we got a problem here.
Okay.
Although McCain is not actually there and voting.
Right. That's a difficulty, but it's a marker. It's out there. Might be able to rally other people to it, but we'll see. It's always going to be a tough case to block a nomination. It usually is, and it's a big thing to step out and block some, and particularly even if they've got a terrible record like this, somebody moving from deputy director of an agency to its directorship. If they've survived that long as deputy director, the typical default reasoning where things are normal is, that person has been groomed for the position. And maybe it's even true with respect to the CIA anyway. But we would like to see, for instance, more people saying, this is troubling, or I'm deeply concerned, or something like that.
There are a lot of Democrats saying that, Tammy Duckworth among them.
Yes.
And she's, being a veteran, being a wounded veteran, has some say here. So has a strong voice.
Well, very good. We should like to see that happen. And also I noticed on Twitter that the situation and all its nuances have set off more fights along more fracture lines about people saying either the Democrats in the Senate are not unified and speaking with one voice in opposition, and we haven't really gotten to that point just yet, but lots of people were hoping that every single Democrat would say hell no immediately, and that usually isn't the way they
as it turns out that not every single Democratic senator or Republican is paying all that much attention at any given time.
That is true too. And
they are not able to respond immediately, knowingly, in an informed voice, what exactly they're talking about.
And and very often they do say, I guess I can't tell you this, but I would like to check with my colleagues who either know more about it or might have decided one way or another that we ought to be unified. But around this point, of course, Dianne Feinstein, you'd think, would be perfectly familiar.
Yeah, having written the torture report.
And
yeah.
So there's our big problem area so far. I'm less convinced by the complaints about, say, Chuck Schumer not issuing marching orders than I am about Dianne Feinstein saying, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Yes,
because, her knee-jerk reaction is usually to be conciliatory.
Yes.
To be respectful of the process.
Why don't more people get along with her, then, I wonder? That is odd. Well, she's the most conciliatory, standoffish senator I know.
I think that you've got a strong enough pushback from... I mean, Wyden and Heinrich were immediately out there as members of the Intelligence Committee saying
so
no. And also opposing Pompeo. So hopefully he'll at least face some tough questioning, and possibly Haspel's nomination will fail. We hope.
That would be great.
It doesn't take that many Democrats now to get to 50 to 49.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
On a nomination. So.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying. That was
so.
Inartfully put.
I don't. Yeah.
To deny 51.
Yes. Okay. There we are. These are tricky rules. Let's see. Other items up for discussion today. I mean, what is happening today aside from the banking bill? Is what's actually going to be on? Is it on the floor
on the Senate floor? Yes. It looks like there's going to be a vote today. I don't know that we are completely sure of a 3:45 p.m. vote today, but that's the last that I saw.
Okay.
We're having to do. Oh no, we've got another cloture vote.
Oh. On banking?
No, wait.
Or something else.
What's that? What's that?
We're always puzzled.
All right. I don't understand this. 3:45, Senate will vote on adoption of McConnell for Crapo amendment. Okay. Okay, we get another substitute amendment.
All right. But all banking.
And following disposition of the McConnell for Crapo amendment, they will vote on cloture.
Okay. On the bill.
And if cloture is invoked on that, post-cloture time will count as if invoked at 12 a.m. on Wednesday, March 14th.
12 a.m. So
they will start the 30 hours. Oh my.
Kagro. Deemed to have started at midnight last night, so that midnight tonight will be 24 hours. So 6 in the morning they would be eligible for the vote. They won't stay up, but so first thing in the morning tomorrow they could vote on final passage. They should just say so. I mean, they love to express things. We're being totally open about it. We're giving you the facts. That's that's one of the big transparency problems we have is you can report everything that they say on the floor and tell you exactly how they scheduled the vote. You just still wouldn't necessarily be able to figure out what that means unless you've studied extensively in the past. So I think that's what it means. Yeah.
I don't know yet. I haven't heard yet what is in McConnell's manager's amendment. Well, McConnell for Crapo is basically another manager's amendment. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. I'll find that out and I will report.
Okay.
But we still have today to call these Democratic senators and say, hey, What's the story?
Your story? Yeah, that's a good question. Did I see that Tim Kaine is among them?
Tim Kaine is among them.
Okay. So that's a problem, and everybody listening in the Virginia region would be interested to know, is Warner not among them? Or is it just
Warner is among them.
Okay.
All right. It's here, I've got my list.
Kaine is the more surprising.
If it loads... It is not wanting to load.
What is it, on Daily Kos or something? I mean, come on. All the servers are doing the Pennsylvania election.
Okay, is it just we're a little slow today? We are a little slow today.
Well, all of us are.
Bennett, Colorado.
Okay.
Carper and Coons, both Delaware.
Okay. I mean, we figure that much, but okay. Still, you shouldn't do it.
Donnelly, Indiana. Mm-hmm. Maggie Hassan, New Hampshire. Heitkamp, North Dakota. Jones, Alabama. Kane, Virginia. King, Maine. Manchin, West Virginia. McCaskill, Missouri. Nelson, Florida. Hey, Florida folks. Peters, Michigan. Shaheen, New Hampshire. Stabenow, Michigan. Tester, Montana. Warner, Virginia.
Stabenow, though.
Stabenow.
It's a bit of a surprise, I think. I'd love to know what the explanation is after we win, but since I can't have that wish, apparently.
A lot of them are saying, well, we've got to prove to our voters that we can get something done and we can do something bipartisan, which is not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, unfortunately, I just don't know enough about what was going on in the banking legislation anyway, except to say, well, I don't know what's going on, but Mitch McConnell seems to be designing it. So my basic instinct on it is no, but that's not really an informed position, and you'd hope for better out of your senator, even if they were voting your way. Yeah. I would like to be able to tell you why. But
the good news is we have been able to delay it. They were expecting a vote earlier this week, and we have been we've been heard. Kane put in an amendment to sort of soften the mortgage lending stuff, the racist stuff.
Yeah.
Again, kind of a fig leaf. They're looking for every excuse they can get to pass this bill. And it is fracturing the Democrats, unfortunately, in the Senate because, progressives like Sherrod Brown, who's also running for re-election this year, are saying, this is bad. This is bad and it's dangerous. We don't want to be back in 2008. We don't want to have to be bailing out banks again, and you're setting this up. It's not maybe as bad as 2008, but it can still happen. We don't need any more bank failures, and we sure don't need to allow racist lending practices.
Yeah,
get off scot-free.
I can't really imagine why anybody thinks that's such a burden, but I imagine they consider it to be one of the smaller points in a larger overall bill that I guess for whatever reason still pleases them. But I still haven't heard what's so great about what's in there. But I didn't expect to hear very much discussion.
I mean, I expect that there is some stuff in Dodd-Frank that is difficult for smaller banks and for community banks. They could have tailored a Dodd-Frank revision bill that was tailored specifically to those banks that didn't include allowing them to be racist in lending. And when you're talking about 25 of the 38 biggest banks in the country, David Dayen calls them the stadium banks. They're big enough to have a stadium named after them.
Oh,
and a lot of them do.
That. That's a good test.
So if a stadium bank is supposedly qualifying as a small community bank, then you've got a problem. They really needed to narrow their focus.
Yes.
And they could have and should have. And they could have done it on a bipartisan basis and said, okay, here, fine.
Well, yeah.
They didn't.
A Democratic Senate could have done it on a bipartisan basis.
Well, yes. Yes, true.
I mean,
they've been working with Crapo from Idaho, the one thing Crapo has done in the past decade.
Well, he needs to have
as
something.
Banking Committee Chairman. Yeah, this is a bad bill. This is not something they should be hanging their hats on for re-election in 2018.
Yeah, I don't really. Well, I don't know. We'll have to. We'll watch and see what happens. I feel like I've been caught unawares on this one, and not because you haven't been writing on it, but because I haven't been keeping up on my reading, because everything's
Well,
bananas.
and McConnell did rush this. I mean, we went from immigration, which we'd been talking about forever, and it's just like, okay, we're going to do this right now. Bam. So there wasn't a lot of lead time, a lot of time to prepare.
Well, I wonder whether, it's a good point. I guess I'm curious whether he did that thinking, well, I can pass things that I rush, don't give people a chance to organize opposition to it, but then also, just sort of, God, I need something. Let's just do something sort of bipartisan. And that's a good bet that you can get something bipartisan done on banking, because money makes those things happen.
Yeah.
And money is there. I love that Stadium Bank designation. That's a great
Isn't that a good
metric,
one? David
a great name.
Is wonderful.
Yes. And interesting that you were saying that, these stadium banks qualifying as small community banks, there's probably, there's a larger population inside one of those stadiums than most small towns.
Right.
So it definitely doesn't make any sense. There's actually more people sitting in the stadium named after us than your community, Mr. Community Banker. Could be 100,000 people in one of those places. Anyway, that's all right. Well, disappointing that is
very
happening.
Disappointing, and they're listening. At least it's not going to mean that they'll change their votes, but we are making them answer us a little bit. So there's a hope if we all get on the phone today. Call your senators, Kagro.
Yeah, I guess I really have to this time. It's not been.
They're your senators. Yeah.
It's not been as critical in the past because they've been in the right place. All right. Well, I'll either call them, or if I'm still on the air, I can use the petition form. Although that's a little late for that. We're going to have to call them if they're going to be voting today. The petition form. We certainly want to enter that anyway, because why not? Just have your name on that list elsewhere. But yeah, if the vote's today, you're going to have to call them. And remember that this is one of those things that they're not likely to have the phone necessarily ringing off the hook. And
right, it's not
happening.
Healthcare.
And so you'll get through, for one thing, and a bill that moves quickly, that doesn't have that much public focus on it, really, even in a Senate office, if you got 100 calls on it, they'd say something's happening out here. There's an earthquake. 100 people out of the state, that's not hard to find. And that would be noted very quickly. It doesn't really take a lot of calls, and you don't have to be furious necessarily. You just have to be interested, and you'd be surprised with what a low volume of calls they sometimes get on things, and how easy it is to steer opinion, at least for people who are, perhaps for people who haven't staked out a very public, very strong case for their vote. There's a way to move them, and it really doesn't take that much. So your calls matter, just as every vote matters. These calls matter. They
matter. They make a difference.
Well, okay, now I know what to do after the show. I was just going to go into hibernation, but instead I'll participate in my democracy.
Good for you.
Okay. And I got 2 calls to make, too. How annoying is that? Both of my senators.
You should have them on speed dial. Really. Yeah. We should all have our senators on speed dial. Mine totally ignore me. Well, Idaho.
Yeah. But that, that's.
But that doesn't keep me from calling, because
right.
Somebody's got to do it, right?
So you get to vent. I have to, I call, and I can say, I just got done with my radio show here in Virginia, and let me tell you, maybe that'll raise eyebrows, maybe not. Or they'll say, oh, I know that guy's show. He's terrible. Don't worry about it. We'll see. Okay, well, thank you for bringing this to our attention, because this could easily have escaped in all of the madness, either happening at the very top in the White House or way down in Etowah County, Alabama. Either one of them could have distracted us, but let's not lose sight of these things. Thank you for bringing it to our attention and struggling through today with us. I appreciate it.
On a happier note, if you can go out and stand with your students, do so.
My students are not, I don't think they're letting them out of the school, but the neighboring counties are, so not too far to go and meet with them. Excellent news. I'm glad to see that, and we'll look for some live updates on that, and we'll be talking about that, I'm sure, tomorrow. As for today, we'll wind things up. Thanks, Joan, for coming by. And,
you are most welcome.
Back to the
I'll try to
salt
be a
mine
little
with you.
bit less scattered next time.
Oh, it's easy to be scattered these days. It's their strategy, so we'll have to look for ways to defeat it.
Demanding people I work with.
Okay. Thanks again, and we'll catch up with you next week.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. Joan McCarter, our senior political writer, will have to do all of that senior political writing, and that keeps us reading the front pages of the Daily Coast each day. I'll tell you what, if there's anything you feel we've missed, stay tuned, because Justice Putnam will be batting cleanup on today's edition of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let me see what we got here. Qatar officials, they're back in the news, have decided to shield Jared Kushner from the Mueller probe. Good for you, guys. And on the rest of the menu, in a victory for voting rights, Democrats in the Kentucky House of Representatives managed to defeat a voter suppression bill pushed by Republicans. That is a rare piece of good news out of Kentucky. What else? Well, I'll try and sneak in a few more items after this.
From Daily Coast Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, here's the news. An Illinois contractor who authored several, quote, Christian books and bid for Trump's border wall is charged with 2 other men of bombing a mosque and a women's health clinic. How's that for top of the news for you? Plus, we should catch up tomorrow on the bombings in Austin as well. See you then.